European economic tensions have temporarily eased. Wobbly Cyprus propped up temporarily, propped up with a 10 billion euro bailout deal. Wiser heads prevailing, Cyprus deciding not to levy a massive tax on the average person's bank accounts. But you have to wonder, when you look at Greece and Portugal and all the other European countries that stand on shaky foundations, you have to wonder how long Germany can scrape up enough cash to keep making those quick fixes. For more, we turn to Charles Ortel from Newport Value Partners and a tremendous columnist at the Washington Times. First of all, Charles, I just want to put on the table that for some of the people who have significant holdings in those Cyprus banks, it looks like they'll be nicked, and it looks like the haircut will be approximately 40%. What do you make of that?
I think it is just the beginning of a sad end for the Eurozone project. What I hear, and I've been actually checking minute by minute the latest news, is that surprisingly, one of the banks that was supposed to remain being propped up, Bank of Cyprus, looks as if it too may actually be liquidated. So the number 40% may actually be at the low end of how much of the deposits are actually going to disappear as a result of this attempted restructuring, which I think is a very, very bad move. Furthermore, it appears as if latest reports suggest the Russians have actually been successful in taking money out of subsidiaries, foreign subsidiaries of these Cyprus banks, while the head offices were shut in Cyprus. So this is looking to be a very bad game here.
What's the deal for the world if Russians and others have their big bank accounts confiscated, evacuated, haircutted, whatever you want to call it, chopped? What's the impact on Europe and the world? One of the reasons I have to ask is because a lot of people just don't take seriously the idea that we're even talking about Cyprus. 1 million people live there. I think they're 0.5% of European GDP. But there's a reason why we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. I mean, Cyprus is part of the official Eurozone. And for the bureaucrats in Brussels and wherever to take this fateful step of confiscating what is in essence private property with little public discussion and little revelation of the underlying facts is a very dangerous precedent for the argument that private property is safe throughout the Eurozone. You start with Cyprus, now you have a precedent. What's going to happen in larger countries that are struggling like Greece, Italy, Spain, and for that matter, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and other troubled parts of the Eurozone empire? So for these Eurocrats to reach this type of solution after a dinner, yet another expensive catered dinner in Brussels, tells me that they don't have any better cards and that this project is now headed down the slippery and dangerous slope, much as happened in the United States 2 centuries ago when the loose confederation under the Articles of Confederation didn't work and ultimately yielded the present system of a strong central authority and federal government.
Charles Ortel, if we were having this conversation in Frankfurt, and I'm your average middle-class German, and I'm asking you, as a person who understands international finance, why should my country stay in the Eurozone? What would you tell me?
I would direct you to an interview I gave in October of 2011 when I advised the German government on Bloomberg that they should have a plan B and consider leaving the Eurozone. To me, it makes little sense to be the wealthiest person at an expensive feast where everybody is dining and is supposed to pay his share of the bill, but nobody other than you has the money. And frankly, Germany went through a very expensive leveraged buyout in acquiring or combining with East Germany. That has taken them many decades, or years anyway, to digest. It is a well-positioned country. It is, albeit on the small end of the size required to compete against the big boys. The rest of Europe really hasn't learned that much economically, I would argue, in the period 1989 forward. And so I fear what we're about to see move in is a very dangerous period where accepted assumptions of what is strong and what is weak will go out the window over subsequent weekends from now through the end of this dangerous year.
Now, overall, have German banks done well by being the major banker for most of Europe? Has that been a good deal for the German banks over the years?
Well, I remember way back when Commerzbank was a very strong bank. And today you look at their stock price, I believe their equity price is under $2 a share, which is always a sign of grave danger. So I wouldn't say that the private sector German banks have done that well at all in a long period of time. I think that some of the major industrial conglomerates in Germany do quite well because they provide machinery and equipment to the wider world, whose customers profit from using this very world-beating technology. So there are elements of the German economy are doing well. I wouldn't say the financial sector is one of those elements.
But would you say that the average citizen, the average middle-class citizen in Germany has done well or has been ripped off over the course of the last, say, 20 years by this Eurozone deal?
I think the average German person has probably done reasonably well. Now that average person faces the brutal reality, as, for example, the Opel workers are seeing with regard to the General Motors car subsidiary, where on the one hand, their labor is very expensive compared to European and world scale, and on the other hand, the opportunity to replace expensive workers everywhere throughout Europe, not just in Germany and also in North America and Japan, is rife, turning to robots and other technological solutions. So I think we have a lot of happy politicians who like to sell hope, change, and vague ideas. And then we have the meat of the global market that is struggling with the brutal reality. There's a huge excess supply of labor and potential labor, and too many expensive workers, frankly.
Charles, I've got just a few seconds over a minute left here. I want to ask you about something that's been going around a lot on the net. 60 Minutes did a feature on it a few weeks ago. It seems to be everywhere now. The Chinese ghost cities. We're talking about millions of units, all new, personal units, private homes, commercial entities, shopping centers, millions of them. They're all new, and they're ghost towns. Nobody's living in them. Nobody's working in them. And somebody, you know, I think, without being paranoid about it, I think should be asking the question, is this a bubble that will burst?
Well, actually, there are two close friends of mine who've asked that question for a number of years. One is Gordon Chang, who wrote an excellent book a number of years ago predicting this. And the other is Jim Chanos, the famed short seller and a college friend, who has been acting on this premise for some time. The simplest check on economic growth statistics I've found over years is to look at how those growth statistics compare to trends in electricity consumption. And when you look at that in China, what you see very clearly is that the miracle it may well be a mirage for the masses.
Charles Ortel, thanks very much for the visit. Looking forward to seeing you again next Tuesday.
Thanks for having me on, Charles.
Charles Ortel writes columns for the Washington Times, and he's with Newport Partners in New York City.